we're going to be discussing how to prevent rodenticide poisoning for children under 6 on this edition of the DIY Pest Control Podcast. Welcome to the DIY Pest Control Podcast, where you get the best info for those who want to perform their own pest control. The DIY Pest Control Podcast is brought to you by Nature Pest. Nature Pest has been providing the finest in commercial and residential integrated pest management for structural, lawns, trees, shrubs, and mosquitoes with better control and less contamination at an affordable price. For more info, visit us at naturepest.com. Hey, welcome to this edition of the DIY Pest Control Podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your certified pest control operator and horticultural specialist here at Nature Pest. And I wanted to discuss an issue that is very serious, and most people do not understand it. And I wanted to take the time because part of our program is to be eco-friendly. But what does that mean? Eco-friendly means different things to different people. Eco-friendly to the environmentalist means that we're not killing wildlife. We're not contaminating pollinators and bees. Eco-friendly to a homeowner means that they don't want pesticides around their children and their pets. Eco-friendly in a restaurant means they don't want their food contaminated for their patrons. So it means different things to different people. And in order for us to be eco-friendly, we have to consider everyone. We have to consider the homeowner. We have to consider the person walking into a business, that they're not exposed to pesticides. We got to protect the wildlife, and we do our part to do that. And one of the biggest problems there is in pest control is rodenticides, rodent control, how to control rodents effectively. And what most people don't understand about using rodenticides is that they use it incorrectly. It could bring death to their pet. It could bring death to their children. It will bring death to wildlife and eventually cause a big, huge problem. And rodenticides, so that you can understand, especially what's on the market as second-generation rodenticides, which are known as anticoagulants and neurotoxins. And what they do is they kill the rodent by having one feeding or multiple feedings of this product, and then they bleed to death. That's how it kills the rodent. The other one is it causes, it's a neurotoxin that causes paralysis, and then it starts paralyzing their liver and their kidneys and everything, and then leads to death. So rodenticides are basically a way to kill the rat, but it's really the only way other than traps and trapping rats. Now, part of eco-friendly, if we are in an organic facility that we're doing, eco-friendly is going to be using glue boards and using traps, and then using products outside to prevent the rodents from wanting to come inside, like rodenticides on the outside. You wouldn't want to use them inside. And a lot of people used to buy over the counter. They would go to their hardware store, their home improvement store, and buy these bait packs, and they would throw these bait packs everywhere. Well, what happens is, here's the danger about using bait packs, is that if you put a bait pack somewhere and a little kid gets a hold of it and eats it thinking it's candy or Pop Rocks or something, they became contaminated, and then they would start having these reactions, and people didn't know what was wrong with them for days. And this was going on and then they started to have internal bleeding and all these problems. By the time they get to the doctor, you got a serious problem on your hands. The same with a pet. A pet would get to it, find it underneath the refrigerator, find it somewhere, and eat it. And what they were having, all these animal and child poisoning, when all the reported cases of rodenticide poisoning, 86%, according to the EPA, 86% of all rodenticide bait poisoning are children under 6 because they eat it. If you have a bait thrown outside and you threw it in your landscape, and you have those bait packs or the bait blocks and you throw it outside in your landscape, an animal can eat it. A child can pick it up and eat it. They put everything in their mouth. And, if you have a child, that's true. So these problem is these people would be putting out products everywhere, and all these animals and kids were getting contaminated, and they finally had to do something, and they pulled it all from the market. Companies like Decon fought it. They didn't want it removed, but eventually they had to give in and voluntarily remove it because the license for that product was revoked by the EPA for a reason. It was killing people. And now you can buy preloaded stations and you can buy the packs, but you can no longer buy the professional rodent packs in anything less than a 16-pound container, which costs about $100. They did that for a reason, so people would not be able to buy it over the counter. It's very dangerous to deal with rodenticides if you don't know what you're doing. You would throw a rodent bait underneath your crawl space, and an animal would crawl under there like a raccoon and then die under there. Now you have a health issue problem because a cat would die under there, and you have the stink of the animal, and you have all the bacteria, and you have the flies, and then you have all the diseases like somebody that has to go in and get that animal can get. And that's why it costs you several $100s to remove an animal from a crawl space or remove it from an attic, where people would throw up the bait in an attic and then end up having a raccoon up there or had squirrels that died. And then the smell is unconscionable. So these things have to be thought through. And my case for them is, if you don't know what you're doing with a chemical product, people think that because you can buy it over the counter, they're not dangerous. They are dangerous. They're very dangerous. And my goal at Nature Pest is to provide the most environmentally responsible pest control that we can offer, and to educate people on how to properly, if you're going to do your own pest control because you cannot afford to hire a professional, then you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your family not to do something that's going to endanger them. And understanding how these products work, understanding what they do and what they do in the environment. The reason, how does it kill an animal out in the wild, or how can it kill? Well, if the rat eats it and the rat dies somewhere, then an owl can pick up that dead rodent. And if the owl eats that dead rodent, it has the chemical active ingredient in it. If they eat enough of those rodents that have been killed, they can die. If your dog eats that rodent that is outside and that rodent died and your cat or your dog eats it, they can eventually over time have enough of that toxicity in their system that starts to cause them damage. And unfortunately, you don't have a cheap option for doing rodent control. This is the cheapest option. Putting out a bait, getting the insect to eat it, dying somewhere else, and hope that nobody picks it up. That's the risk. The other option is trapping, constant trapping, but that can get very expensive, because if you have a professional company coming out and has to charge you $35 to $65 a trip to control your rodents by trapping, and they have to come out every 2 to 3 days, that gets really expensive. If not, you're going to have to do it yourself and dispose of all these rodents, dead rodents, on a frequent basis. So there is no real solution to this that is, one, cost effective, cheap, or affordable for some people to do. And this is why people went with that cheap option of just throwing little packs that they could buy for a couple of dollars everywhere that control their rodents. But in the meantime, people are dying, animals are dying, and the environment is being impacted. And to a lot of places where they've banned it, not only have they banned it from stores, but certain states and certain counties have banned it from their state. So I just want to keep you informed of this, that, it is irresponsible to do what is not on the label. And what you have to do is read that label. That label is there for a reason. That label is actually a federal document. And if you violate that label and something happens, you could potentially be brought up on federal charges or be fined. Even in your state, if your state has a law against using it and you use the product, you could get into serious trouble with your state. So it's not a very popular thing to be talking about. It's not going to cause a lot of people to want to listen to this, but I think it's vitally important that we become environmentally responsible in all areas. Not just become environmentally responsible and trying to save a whale that's 10,000 miles from us, but also being responsible in our homes and around our pets and other people's pets that might walk onto your property and be contaminated by it. I think we owe it to everyone to be a good neighbor. And that's what this podcast is really all about. So, folks, I thank you for listening. And until next time, you have a great one. Thank you for listening to the DIY Pest Control Podcast. Please remember that although Franklin Hernandez is a certified and licensed pest control operator in the state of Florida, the content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. You should consult your local and state government or cooperative extension service before performing any pest control service. Remember to always read and follow label directions because the label is the law.